Hello, everyone who might be joining me tonight for a special Tuesday night edition of Open Mic. Typically, I do this on Thursday night, but in order to accommodate my guest's schedule tonight, kind of like last week or maybe the week before, for Angry Canadian, I moved it to I think we did it on Friday last week, but moving it around this week to accommodate another guest schedule. So having it on a Tuesday night. And that awesome guest is the Gourd King. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Hello. Oh, thank you for having me. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while now, so it's cool to finally be able to do it.
Yeah, I've been, kind of trying to get as many people as I can on here to talk about video games, kind of get my figures out there and get connected with other people who are kind of in the same sphere. So
Yeah.
it's nice to connect and have a chance to talk games.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I guess the first thing that I wanted to ask you, not specifically game related, but I want to know where the Gourd King came from.
Okay, let's see. I'll try to condense this somewhat. Okay, so the original inception of the channel idea was actually going to be myself and my brother, and the name of the channel was See It Twice. And it was based on kind of a movie related philosophy we had about seeing movies multiple times to kind of, iron out how you think and feel about it. But then he ended up meeting his wife. That kind of sucked away our time to where we could, do stuff together. And so we had to break that up. She Yoko Ono'd us. But then when I eventually started my channel, which I kept the name See It Twice because that was my idea, because I was doing things other than movies, because it was a long time between the breakup of that idea and when I actually started.
Okay.
And in that time, I had decided I was going to do more than one thing, and I was going to do gaming stuff and all that. But I kind of chose around that time. I was like, I kind of need to rebrand. It's like this channel's not fully movie related, so it would make more sense to do something. And one of the ideas I had when my brother and I's channel ideas kind of parted ways was to kind of create this faux sidekick, kind of like the Craig Ferguson show where he's got the robot skeleton.
Okay.
And
I've seen a little bit of that show, but I don't know the robot skeleton. But
I would highly recommend watching clips. It was the last good late night show, and it was
Okay.
great. It was really funny. But yeah, he had this like robot skeleton that was controlled and voiced by a guy named Josh Robert Thompson. Really funny guy.
Okay.
And now, granted, I would have to voice my sidekick myself, but I was like, okay, I can record this and cut it together because the reason for doing this was because I tend to play off of other people a little bit better than just talking solo unless it's scripted.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Understandable.
my original idea was to record segments live on camera. But I went away from that. I didn't particularly like doing it that way. And when rebranding, I literally created my sidekick, like a plastic pumpkin, which, the avatar image you see is kind of a cartoonized version of what I actually have.
Okay.
And the original name was Gordon O'Malley. And
Okay. I was just gonna ask, did he have a name?
he had a name. It was Gordon O'Malley, which is kind of a spin. Instead of saying "Good God Almighty," you would say "Good Gord O'Malley."
Okay.
It's kind of a silly, cheesy idea, but I ditched that, and because I always found the term God King very kind of irritating, because I'm a Christian and I find that kind of blasphemous. But
Okay.
I thought Gourd King would be kind of a funny way to make fun of that. So that's where that pretty much came from, was, going from God King to Gourd King. And I was like, I could just adopt this as a persona and
Okay.
play off of that instead. And it's turned out that there's a lot. It's kind of a malleable word. There's a lot of different words you can mess with the word gourd. So it works to my benefit.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of double entendres maybe would be a good way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean nothing dirty or anything,
Right.
but so yeah, definitely like you can mess with words, good. You can mess with words like God. You can mess with anything that rhymes with it. I mean, it's like, and it's funny is the people I use it around. It's kind of a brainworm a little bit, or where it gets in their head a little bit and they start using it themselves, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is getting in my head. And I was like, yeah, that's the idea. It's to mess with
Awesome.
the lexicon.
So speaking of God King, the first thing that comes to my mind, or gaming related, is did you ever play Infinity Blade?
I it sounds familiar. I don't think I played it.
It was an
Um,
iOS only game, and it was one of the only like mobile games that's not on like a like an actual dedicated handheld like a Game Boy or something that I played a crap load of.
okay, I'm looking at that. I played a little bit of that, but I
Um,
never like did it extensively. But yeah, I do vaguely remember that game.
okay,
Sounds like one of the
because
first like really. It wasn't that one of the first iOS games that have like really sharp graphics.
yeah, it was one of the first ones that like looked really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, the antagonist of the series because I never really played a lot of 3, but I played a good amount of 1, and I played a heck of a lot of Infinity Blade 2. And the antagonist of 1 and 2 at least was the God King. He didn't really
Oh no.
have a name. Did he have a name? I don't remember having like an actual name. I just remember that's what he was referred to as. I'm sure he probably was in 3 as well, but I didn't play a whole lot of it. And the reason why is because it splits it up into instead of just playing as the main character, I think his name was Cyrus or Sirius or something like that.
Mhm.
They split it up and you have 2 characters you can switch between. Um I forget what her name was. But your XP isn't shared. So every time you switch over to the other character, you're farther behind than you were with the character you're just playing. And so it really felt like a huge grind. It would have been made the game infinitely better if your XP pool was shared so
Mhm.
that you can level up your characters equally. And I would have played a heck of a lot more of 3, but I played the heck. I could probably pull it up here on my iPad. And yeah, the God King was the antagonist of that game. And it's basically like, how it plays is you don't like move around. It's you, like tap to initiate a cutscene essentially where you go to like the next like monster that you fight, and each monster has like different like strengths and weaknesses, and they have different types of weapons and attack patterns and stuff.
So
And
sounds
then
like it's got a little bit of like Fire Emblem maybe in it. Maybe a little bit.
I couldn't say because I don't know anything about Fire Emblem.
Really? Oh, Fire
Yeah,
Emblem was that's so much fun.
I'm not a fan of JRPGs, so I'm not familiar with very many
Well,
of them.
it's not a typical JRPG. It's got like kind of a chessboard uh structure. It's like you've got like all these
Okay.
square things and you move them along those and then you initiate battles and uh I know the early games like there would be like 3 different types of weapons and it's kind of a paper rock scissors thing where each one has a weapon they're really strong against and one they're really
Okay.
weak against. So yeah, Fire Emblem's fantastic. And then there's the
Do
relationship system that they've got in there. It's really cool.
Yeah, when I had Melee James and Melee K on for my last party chat, one of the Fire Emblem games was K's answer to one of the questions. So I know she loves it. But do the battles in that like take place in like real time, or do they? Is it like is it turn based, or how exactly does the combat actually work?
If I remember correctly, because it's been a little while since I've played Fire Emblem, but you basically it's like you take it's whenever you initiate a battle, it's kind of a one-on-one thing, and and it's permadeath basically. So if your character dies, they're done. They're out of the game
Okay,
completely. So like this is a story-based game, and like you're acknowledging their death. So whatever relationship they had, those are severed. They're done. Uh, but yeah, you're like choosing various actions to do in these battles. So it's kind of like I said, it's got the chessboard thing, and then it goes into I guess kind of turn-based battle.
okay, yeah, because turn-based combat's like one of my least favorite things. So if I hear it's a turn-based game, it definitely loses a lot of interest for me. Um, but yeah, on Infinity Blade, you don't like control where you go. It's just like you have like paths. It's like tap here to take this path or this path, and you might run into like different monsters. But your combat is all real time. So you have like depending on what weapon you're using, you can either like parry their attack, or you can dodge it, or you can duck, or you can block it, depending on what weapons you're using as well. And they each have strengths and weaknesses to different types of magic. But it's kind of like Fruit Ninja, where you like you slash across the screen and stuff, and you do
Okay.
it's all touch controls because it's on on iOS. It's much better on iPad when you have a much bigger screen than on the phone.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but then if you die, or if you beat beat the final boss, it's kind of like not permanent, but you like start over, like at least in the first one when you die, it's like 20 years later, and it's essentially your son going through. So it counts like
Huh.
how many like bloodlines you go through. Um, and there's different ways to beat it because they really fleshed it out a lot more in Infinity Blade 2, because there's different branching paths and you can do things each run that like lead to different endings, or different enemies showing up. It was really cool how they did it. But like in Infinity Blade 2, I think I got up to like bloodline like 300 or something. I played a heck of a lot of it. So yeah, just you talking about the God King brought that up, and I haven't talked about. I think that's the first time I've ever even mentioned Infinity Blade on my channel, but I loved the heck out of it too. And there was an update that added basically lightsabers to the game. They're called
Oh
solar
wow.
trans weapons. Um, and by themselves they're pretty weak, but there's a gem system in it that you can slot into your weapons and armor, that either if you put it into your weapon, the different types of gems you slot in will do different types of damage, like fire damage or ice damage or water damage or wind damage or whatever. Or if you put it into armor, it'll give you stronger immunity to those elements if the enemy does those type of damage types. But when you put it into like the solar trans weapons, which were the lightsabers, they're very weak by themselves. But when you slot a gem into it, it multiplies the power of that gem times 10. So they become really powerful with that element. But there's a crafting system too. So if you get a bunch of the same type of gem, you can fuse them into one gem that's stronger, and it's basically limitless. But the higher the tier it gets, the more and more lower level tiers it takes to craft one of those. But you can create like the I always call them like the prism, because you can, if you do it right, you have all the right level, you can fuse them so that your weapons do all of the different elemental types of damage simultaneously. And if you do another one, you can put it in your armor and you can become immune to all of those elemental types of damage. And so if you put that into your solar trans weapon, that thing destroys everything, because it does crazy amounts of damage, because it does all the elements at the same time. And the only enemies that are immune to all enemy types are like the highest level bosses in the game. So it just makes the game a breeze, except for the enemies that have the immunity to it, because then you can't really rely on it.
Well, it sounds to me like you barely played this at all.
Yeah, I really, I wish I would have played more of Infinity Blade 3. I mean, I still could, but it's just so long ago now. I've kind of passed it. But yes, I loved playing Infinity Blade 2. That was my favorite of the three.
Nice.
So, speaking of that, were there any mobile games that you ever got like really into?
I mean, I've played a
That
few, but I don't know if I've ever played them as anything other than just kind of
here and
leisurely.
there?
If you don't have something to read in the bathroom, you've got a mobile game or something, or just kind of a time killer. I mean, I'd say the one I spent the most time on is that Empires and Puzzles game. Uh,
I
it's
don't remember
very
that one.
bland after a little while, but addictive at the same time. But I mean, I'd say Fruit Ninja was a really well constructed one for what it was. It was pretty. That was a fun one. I liked that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was fun.
Uh, and I played a bit of Angry Birds when that was first kind of a thing. But I can't say I ever got like really into one, because after a little while, I was like, I've got consoles. Why don't I just play those? Those have better stuff.
Yeah, don't you guys have phones?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I've never been into Diablo, but when I heard about that, I'm like, oh god, you guys just shot yourself in the foot. Come on, do you know anything about the gaming community? We want games on consoles and PCs, not on our phones.
I've never played Diablo. I've never
Yeah,
played one.
I almost got in Diablo, Diablo 3, because a friend of mine had a buddy who was like he was gonna get out of Diablo, and he almost sold it to me, but then he's like, "Nah, I'm gonna keep it." So I never ended up buying his copy of Diablo 3, so I never gotten into the
I wanna
franchise.
say I almost or maybe even did buy Diablo 2, like, back in the early 2000s, because I was like, "Okay, this is made by the people who did StarCraft," and StarCraft to this day is one of my all-time favorite games,
Okay.
and, I thought it was basically kind of this underworldish version of StarCraft, which sounded pretty cool. But I learned pretty quickly it was very different. It was about
Yeah.
looting and stuff, and I was like, okay, so it's learning a whole new thing, and I never got around to doing it. I do have Diablo 3 in my PlayStation Digital library, but I haven't gotten into that either. So
Okay. I might too, just be from like games with gold and stuff. Because I'm an Xbox guy,
right.
so I've got a huge Xbox library. I may have ended up with it at some point, but yeah, I have no interest in actually playing it. Well, I mean, I probably would like it if I actually got into it, but it's just not something I ever plan on doing.
Mhm. I mean, it's I because I have it in my library and because I stream games live, I'm sure at some point I'll put it up as an option on my channel and say, "Hey, do you want me to play this?" And I'm sure at some point someone will say yes to it. I doubt it'll stay buried forever, but yeah, it's not something I've ever been super inclined to getting into. It's just I've watched enough people do it where I was like, okay, I could get into this, but I'm not like gung ho about trying it out. It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily speak to my sensibilities.
yeah, same here. One that I almost got into because it's basically a free to play version. Are you familiar with Path of Exile?
I've heard of that. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's another one I might have that in my
It's
library.
basically a Diablo clone, but it's free to play.
Okay.
I played like the intro of it, and then I got to the part where you start like specking your character, and this game has the most convoluted skill tree I've ever seen in my entire life. I was like, this is way too complex. I'm not gonna do this. No thanks. I'm gonna see if let's see here. I want you to see it because it's nuts. Path of Exile skill tree. Let me see if I can pull up is that a good one? No, let's go with this one. Come on. Oh, do I have to click on it to go full screen? No, that's a video. I don't want a video. I want an image. Let's go to images. Here we go. And this. Oh, please give me a high res version of this. Okay. Yeah, here we go. All right, let me share. No, that's not what I want. Share screen. And window. And let's do that. And share that. Okay. So this is the skill tree for Path of Exile.
Wow.
And you start in the center here and you can build out in literally any direction. And a lot of these you can put skill points into multiple times. So it's not like every one of these is like unique. Every one of these little dots, some of them you can upgrade multiple times. So I was like,
I
that
mean,
is way too complex.
it kind of I mean, I'd have to I guess I'd have to play it to know for sure how it works, but it kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy X's skill tree. That's called the Sphere Grid in that game, and I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy X. I mean, it's now Final Fantasy X's tree is a little bit more straightforward because like each of your characters has that skill tree that's the Sphere Grid, and
Oh,
they
I've
kind
heard
of
about that.
they start each character though on a specific path. Like, your black mage is kind of on a black mage path, your brawlers are on brawler paths, your balanced ones are balanced, your white healers, all that stuff. Uh Now
Okay.
once you
Yeah.
kind of finish those paths, you can kind of actually take each one and fill the whole thing with all of them. So it's there are times where I guess you have to kind of choose which little things to upgrade here and there. And it's I didn't think that one was that hard to follow, but that one actually probably is a little bit more complicated uh if it's not guiding
Yeah.
you in any way. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be against, but yeah, it looks a lot. Yeah, I think
So
that's the
this
skill tree
this
from
is
that's the Sphere
the
Grid.
spear grid that you mentioned
Yeah.
from Final Fantasy. So I've never seen this before because I don't I've never played a Final Fantasy game. Yeah, this looks very
What?
complicated, but this is also this looks like this is for all each of your party members. Is that right?
If you see the black labels there, that's the starting point for all of your characters. And
Okay.
like I said, the ones they're kind of adjacent to start with, and that they can naturally be led down. Uh, I mean, you're pretty much always kind of working your way up to various abilities and deciding along the way if you want to up their HP or up their, you know, strength or attack or defense or whatever along the way. but it's not as complicated. But
It
obviously, with
definitely
all
looks
that many
like it.
routes, yeah,
But
with
yeah, this is
all those
for
routes, it can be.
all your
There
characters.
are
'Cause
times where you're like, "What should I do?" But it's
yeah,
it's it's not hard to figure out in that game, though.
both games seem like they're the type of game where you have what's the term for that? Where it's like you just have so many options, you're like frozen, you don't know what to do. Like when you're scrolling through like Netflix, it's like there's so many things I don't know what to watch.
I mean, I would say with FF10, it's not really that bad. Uh, there's a little bit of indecision, I guess, and plus you can always it's kind of easy to go back and fill in the other ones if you want to, and they don't penalize you that much if you want to do that. But
Okay.
there are times where you have to make choices of, okay, if I want to be a little bit more this way or that way, but it's not too bad. The
Okay.
other one definitely seems a little bit more frozen. It's like freezes you and makes you think, what do I want to do here?
Yeah, I got to
Yeah.
that point. I'm like, this is way too much. I could, which explains why like people have like thousands of hours in the game because you could, make the most ridiculous builds you could possibly imagine.
I mean, and
So
that's the thing. If it's got a system of where you can make specific builds, then I think that's okay because that alone will kind of guide you the way, however you want to make your character. But you kind of have to get some familiarity. So it's that first playthrough where the learning curve is probably pretty steep.
yeah, I've heard from people who have played it. They're like, don't count on actually getting through the game until like your seventh or eighth character.
Jeez.
So
Yeah, that might be a turnoff for me.
yeah, so
I
that's
don't
kind of
mind a
where I was
learning
like,
curve, but that's a bit much.
yeah, I definitely don't knock it because in my opinion, the more options, the better. But for in something like that, it's like that's too many options for me personally that I don't think I'm even going to get into it. So, um, let's get into things that we are more familiar with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm an Xbox. I was a Nintendo kid and then an Xbox guy about high school and onward. So, what about you? What was kind of your gaming
I mean,
console?
I've never been a loyalist to any console or PC or anything. I mean, to me, it's always just I go where the good games are, and so it tends to sway a little bit back and forth. I guess with Xbox, like their kind of recent lack of exclusives has bugged me to where it's like I haven't gotten into their stuff all that much. Even though I think as a piece of hardware, it's actually pretty dang good
Oh yeah.
because there's the backwards compatibility, which obviously Sony is lacking with you know, PS3. I'll tell people it's like I like a lot of games for PS3, but the hardware was just a disaster as far as I'm concerned. I think in hindsight, it was a huge mistake. Some of the stuff they did, the cell processor, all that stuff. The only good thing that PS3 did hardware wise was the Blu-ray thing, because
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Blu-rays kind of that obviously changed the movie format really well, and that's great. But it's shot them in the foot with backwards compatibility really badly because it's really hard to port games from PS3 up to PS4 and so on because you can't it's kind of complex to do that with games that operate on different processors and that kind of stuff. So you're basically relegated to streaming these games now,
Oh,
which
through
isn't
their service.
yeah, and the sucky thing is that
Unless you
uh
have good internet.
well, aside from that, I mean, granted, I have good internet, so that's not a big deal for me personally. But what really sucks and why I refuse to pay for their premium service, aside from the fact that they just jacked up the price,
Oh no.
is that to me, it's like if you own like a PS3 game digitally, you should have access to that for free. If it's in
Yes.
their streaming library, then it's like, okay, you should not have to pay anything extra
Oh,
to
I
stream
totally
that.
get what you're
And you
saying.
do. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. It's like I've
Th-
got a pretty high number of games that I could do that with if they allowed it, but right now they don't. So ugh.
That's yeah. I'd have to think about it, but I know it's the same thing like on Xbox that they got the cloud streaming option. But if you don't subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate, then you don't get the cloud streaming, even if you own that game digitally.
Mhm.
So I totally get where you're coming from. But yeah, now I correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there different models of PS4s that are and are not backwards compatible with the PS3 or something like that?
Not that I've ever heard, no.
Okay,
Because
that's
it's yeah, I sincerely doubt it. I know
well,
that back when PS3 came out, there were models of PS3s that were backwards compatible with PS2.
Maybe
But
that's what I'm thinking
yeah,
of.
I mean that's probably what you're remembering there. But no, PS4 I don't think has ever had any compatibility with PS3 as far as like putting discs in and things like that.
So
I
most
don't
games
think
that
it's
you could play
able.
on a PS3, you could play on a PS4.
Do what now?
Most games you could play on a PS3, you could play on a
No,
PS4.
you can't. No, you
Oh, you
can't.
can't at
You
all,
absolutely cannot. Unless they've ported it or they've done a remaster.
or a
No.
remaster. Okay,
Yeah. Which
but
they have remastered a lot of games from
a lot of their
PS3
big
over.
ones.
Not enough of them, but some of them. But
Okay, but
yeah,
the
as far as
PS.
putting the disc in, that doesn't work.
Okay, the
Unfortunately.
PS3 though did have compatibility with PS2, PS1, and PS2 games, but then later on they removed that. Is that what it was?
It's weird. I don't know what was specifically special about the particular PS3 model that allowed it to be PS2 compatible, but it was like one or two models of theirs was, and then the rest weren't. And this was very early on for some reason. Like it was, I want to say it was the original 80 gig one, and they when they first released the PS3s, I think there were two separate models of different hard drive sizes.
Hard drive sizes. Okay,
Yeah, and I think one of them was compatible with PS2 games by accident. Like they didn't necessarily plan it, but people were like, "Hey, if you can actually play PS2 games on this one. How cool is that?" And I don't know if they stopped making them or if that was just I don't know if they ever tried to patch it out or anything. I wouldn't think they would, but uh
who knows?
none of their other PS3 models were able to do that. PS1 for some reason was fine. I don't know why PS1 games were fine on the PS3, but as far as I know, most, if not all, of PS1 games were okay on PS3.
Yeah,
It's
all
weird.
of
It's a weird piece of hardware.
all the platforms have had their fair share of boneheaded decisions.
Yeah.
Like PlayStation held out on the longest time on being cross-platform. You
Mhm.
know, Xbox's 2013 E3. It's like always online, and you
Yeah.
can't share games. Nintendo's like, we're gonna put a physical game out and a digital game out, but then we're gonna take it off the store for no reason whatsoever, so you can't buy it anymore anywhere. Our internet and is the way our online multiplayer gaming is still like basically on like dial up, and we have no way to chat with people in game. You have to use your phone and the stupid app. It's like, man, it's like,
And
can
weren't they also
anybody
trying to
get
keep
it all
people
right?
they were trying to keep people from buying used games too, weren't they?
Are we talking about Xbox?
Yeah. I think they had something to where it's like your used games, you wouldn't be able to play used games. Like there was I'd have to look that up to be sure, but if I'm not mistaken, there was this very
I
brief spot where they
Oh,
announced something to where it's like that it would make like sharing games almost impossible. And
yeah,
that meant
no,
used games would basically go by the wayside for them.
you're
And people were
right.
like, no. They
There
took a
was some,
huge hit for that.
there was something along the lines of that. Like, in order to like play a game that you hadn't played before, you had like it was gonna like charge you a fee or something, and it was gonna, yeah, it would have wrecked the used game market. So, though there was one good thing about their original plan for the Xbox One when it launched, and had to do with like family like sharing. You could actually like share games digitally with people who may not actually, well, I don't know if they planned it for that, but you definitely could have, utilized the system to share your games digitally with people who are not in your family, which you can actually do right now, through some cool stuff. So, if you game share with other people who have Xbox, their library of games digitally, of course, can show up on your Xbox and vice versa, which is really cool. But yeah, they that was the one. There was, I might be getting the details mixed up of what it was, but I remember when they announced it, there was one good thing about that, but all the other stuff overshadowed it. And would have, it's good that they did backtrack on that, because they already shot themselves in the foot
Yeah,
enough.
it's they're kind of still recovering from it because
Oh
that
yeah,
so many people gravitated towards PS4 because of that, and PS4 turned out to be a pretty solid console to most people. I mean, there are some complaints I have with some of the exclusives. I think PS4 is kind of ushered in a lot of way too easy hand holding kind of games like Horizon Zero Dawn, which I don't hate Horizon Zero Dawn, but it holds your hand way too much, and I've heard the sequel is even worse. But I still would say the PS4 era is pretty good, and it was really good for casual gamers. And I think so many people gravitated towards it that Xbox is still not recovered yet.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
and
PS4, I
Switch
think.
and Switch at the same time has done excellent.
Oh yeah,
You
it's
know,
done
Switch has
massive.
been an excellent comeback for Nintendo,
Yeah,
and they're
PS4.
just getting better.
I think PS4 more than doubled the sales of the Xbox One.
I think so. Yeah.
And the Game Pass has done a lot to help rebuild Microsoft's image after
Yeah, yeah. That's probably the best
debacle
thing
that
they've
was
done
the
in a long
2013
time.
E3. So they're getting back up there. Yeah, PS4 was big. Yeah, Nintendo Switch is getting there. Probably won't pass it, but is getting close to the PS2 for the most highest selling console of all time.
Yeah.
I checked it, I think yesterday, and I think it was like I don't remember the numbers, but I think the Switch is about 30 million short of the PS2.
Okay.
Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I would guess it probably doesn't make it because I know Switch 2 is probably on the horizon. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about
I
them
was
finally releasing
just
a new one. But
I was just talking about that
I mean, I
um,
have some issues with
last
Nintendo
night.
also, but they're overall probably as far as pleasing the fans, they're doing the best right now. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
they're
definitely agree
kind
with
of
that.
knocking their last two whatever they call their shows. I can never remember what
Oh,
they call their
Nintendo Directs.
Nintendo Directs. Yeah, their last two have been excellent.
Okay,
They've been just people have been just flocking to them, just saying, "Oh, you're all doing it right," blah blah blah. And I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, they're remaking one of my top 10 favorite games of all
that
time.
Mario RPG.
Yeah, I love that game so much.
One of
So,
my friends that I think he was one of the first people I had on my channel was Gino 95, and
and
part of his
that's where the
name.
name comes from.
Oh, so you're familiar with Gino?
Oh yeah, oh
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, he was one of the
Gino's the
first people I
character
had on my channel.
I always wanted Gino to come back. I loved Gino from that game.
Yeah, the character. There's a guy on YouTube who's Gino 95.
Oh yeah, no, I got
Okay,
what you were saying.
just
Like
want to make
that's
sure we're
once you
on the
said
same
his name
page.
was Geno 95, it's like, oh well, that's where he got his name then.
Yes,
Clearly.
that's part of his name. So I was like, before we go live, do I call you Gino 95, Gino SMRPG? He's like, just call me Gino. But yeah, when I like had him on my channel. He was like one of the first guests I had on my channel, and then like a week later they announced the remake, and I was like, "Hey, are you excited about these?" He's like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest day of my life!" It was
Like the
funny.
only bad thing you could say about what they're doing with the remake is the cover art's terrible. It's so
I have not
bland.
seen it yet.
It's really bland. Like it's just like the pretty versions of the characters kind of reanimated and then like against a white backdrop. I'm like, come on, do a little bit of art with it or something. That's like your cover art looks weird.
Oh yeah, that is kind of bland
Kind of
considering what
bland,
was
but
the.
I'm like, I don't care. I'm buying that game. That's the first RPG I ever played. It's very first. And
Okay.
I absolutely love it.
That was I didn't I was talking about this recently. I played a little bit of it over at a friend's. I never played the entirety of it. The first like RPG that I like ever played was Oblivion. That was what got me into RPGs because
Okay.
I was never a fan of turn-based, which is one of the reasons why I never got into Pokemon.
I've
Uh,
never played Pokemon. Never
so
once.
I my mental image of RPGs until I knew about Elder Scrolls Oblivion was that RPGs were turn-based. I didn't know that they could have real-time RPGs. So when I discovered like real-time RPGs exist, I played Oblivion. I'm like, oh my god, this is
Yeah,
fantastic.
I'd say that was probably true of me as well because there for me it was Mario RPG and Final Fantasy were the ones I most knew about, and those are turn-based. And granted, I didn't have a problem with that. I thought they were a blast, but yeah, it's like when the real-time RPG started, and we're just like, oh, that's actually pretty cool how they do that. And I think there's a place for both. I
Oh yeah,
enjoy both a great deal. Um, I'm. Are you excited about the notion that Oblivion's probably getting a remake, remaster, or one of those two?
it's like if they're like we've remade Skyrim enough time. Let's go back and remake Oblivion.
Yeah.
I'd love another reason to go play Oblivion again. I love that game.
Which do you
Um,
think is better between those two?
Oblivion and Skyrim.
Mm-hmm. Because I never played
I'm
Oblivion, so I'm curious because I have
I'm
opinions on Skyrim.
I'm trying not to be biased because I played a lot more. I mean, I played a couple hundred hours of Oblivion, but then I didn't play it again ever, really. But then when Skyrim came out, I played that for probably a good amount longer than I played Oblivion.
Mhm.
And it's obviously that was many years later, so it's much fresher in my mind. And I've gone back and played it here and there occasionally as well. Um,
Like, I always felt like Oblivion was just kind of treated like a precursor to Skyrim, and yet I felt like most people spoke they tend like, in hindsight, I know a lot of people that played and love both tend to speak a little more highly of Oblivion.
yeah,
They're like, if I think a lot of what I've heard is they're like, if the gameplay was up to date with Skyrim or better, it's like certain like, superficial elements, I guess, were up to date with it. This one would get replayed more, but Skyrim was just so well modded by, various people in the modding community and that which it just there was much more to do in it. Uh
yeah, that's kind of the general consensus I've got as well. Because there were
yeah.
like there's things that each of them did better than the other. Obviously, um, I probably enjoyed Skyrim a little bit more. But I don't know if I could say it was a better game because there are things like when it comes to like crafting and stuff, there's a lot more freedom in the crafting sort of things in Oblivion for crafting spells
Okay.
and alchemy and stuff. You're much more limited in those aspects in Skyrim. So I love them both though. So I would love a reason to go back and play Oblivion again.
Probably my biggest gaming hot take is that I think Skyrim and look, I do like Skyrim. I like it. I platinumed it on PlayStation. I spent a lot of time with it, but I think it's the most overrated game ever made. I really
Okay,
do. I think
I
it's I mean,
I can totally
granted,
get that.
I have a much lower opinion of Bethesda than most people do. Now granted, I think some people are catching up to it because it's becoming more and more obvious that since they hit it big was like I almost felt like Skyrim was bad for them, uh, in the sense that, and this is my theory is that I think people speak more highly of Oblivion that love them both because that's back when they cared more. I think Skyrim's success kind of made them rest on their laurels a little bit.
Yeah,
And, like, I think like, I was excited for Fallout 4 because I had played New Vegas, then later I learned New Vegas wasn't even really made by them, it was just
yeah. It
published.
was. It
Uh,
was.
Obsidian,
Yes, Obsidian.
yeah, and I love New Vegas. New Vegas is fantastic, that's my
I've
favorite
heard
game with their
from
name on it.
a lot of people that New Vegas is the best of the rebooted Fallout franchise
It
after the
is,
patches because it came out in not a very good state, but after
yeah.
the patches, I've heard it's the best. I've
I
I was a
played it very late in its life. Like, I came
okay,
to those games all pretty late, except for Fallout 4, I played that kind of immediately, and I didn't hate Fallout 4, but I found it to be very average. And
okay,
most of what I'm hearing about Starfield is that it's kinda mediocre,
yeah, that's what
kinda
I'm hearing
bland,
too.
and so it's like, "Oh, you're all finally catching up to what Bethesda's become," so that's interesting.
Yeah,
I kind of felt like they've been that way for a little longer than most, but,
yeah,
that's why they keep releasing Skyrim over and over and relying on modders to make their game better. 'Cause
yeah. That's what.
I don't like that people give them credit for what modders do, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Don't" it's like, "Don't call Skyrim great because of modders. That's not something they should get credit for." And they kind of were open about, you know, building their reputation for modders. They even like, I think, what's his face, the guy who I guess is the head of Bethesda said that
oh, Todd Howard,
Todd Howard, yeah. I knew it was Todd something. I always mix up Howard and Phillips, I think.
Todd
Yeah.
Phillips. That name sounds familiar.
I think Todd Phillips, he is with, I think he's like a director or something like that, but I always mix them up for some weird reason.
Oh, you're
I think
right.
he's the
He is
guy who
a
directed
director.
he's like a director who did like Joker or something, and I
Yeah, he
always
did
mix them up for
Joker
some weird reason.
and the
And there's
Hangover
another Todd, isn't
movies.
there? There's like Todd McFarland, I think, is
Todd
the other.
McFarlane, he does like action figures and stuff.
Yeah, so I
And
always
the
there's these 3 prominent Todds I always mix up. But, yeah, the head of Bethesda basically was like, saying stuff like, "Yeah, we want our modders to fix and make this game better over time," and I was like, "That just got under my skin." I was like, "You lazy." insert inappropriate insult here.
Yeah,
It's like
I will
that's
give them
yeah.
credit for being pretty supportive of the modding community because there are developers who are like, "No, you will play our game our way," and
Yeah, I mean, it's supporting them's great. I think that's
but yeah,
fantastic, but it's
don't
like
take
you should
credit for what other
don't
people
take
do.
credit for them. Don't build your reputation off of them because I'm like, you're a mooch then. It's like it's appreciating them in name is basically it's like, no, what you're saying is save my game. It's because people are kind of like, it's Starfield's looking like it's gonna be forgotten unless the modders actually do something really special with it.
Yeah,
Which there's a good chance they will.
yeah, I'll probably still play Starfield at some point. I'm not like chomping at the bit to get to it though because I've got hundreds of other games to get to first. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
did
I'm not.
play.
I mean, I can't play it because I don't have a gaming PC or an Xbox. But I'll be honest, if I did, and eventually I would like to have a gaming PC, I can't say I'm all that. I'm really not even remotely interested in it. Just like, it's whatever.
I'm
There's other
pretty
space games.
sure.
I'd rather play No Man's Sky. I can play that. It looks
I'm.
more interesting.
I am very much looking forward to playing that at some point as well. Starfield does have cloud streaming, so if you had Game Pass Ultimate, you could stream it to your PC without having a PC that could run it itself.
Uh.
I know that's really going to sell you on Game Pass Ultimate, right? um, but yeah, I played a lot of Fallout 3, but I never played New Vegas, and I've played probably about I haven't gotten very far, but I've played probably about like 10 hours or so of Fallout 4.
I played 4 to completion. I didn't do everything in it. I did like the various endings. Like I basically reloaded a save point and did all the endings. It was
Okay.
okay. It wasn't a great game. I actually even got it. They gave it away for free when you get a PS5, or at least originally. I think they stopped doing this, but originally when you get a PS5, they gave you access to like 20 games from the PS4 era. And Fallout 4 is one of them. So I technically have that game for free, but
Okay.
I've never gone back to it. 3 is the one I probably played the least because I didn't like it. I thought it was just a
Okay.
buggy mess. But granted, I was
Hmm.
playing the PS3 version, and the PS3 version just crashed constantly.
Interesting.
But
Yeah, I don't because I played it on 360 when it came out, and I don't remember
yeah,
the
New
only.
Vegas I played on 360 and did everything. I loved it.
Okay,
I got all the achievements, even the DLC ones. I was like, this game
nice.
rocks. Loved it.
Yeah, I 100%ed Fallout 3. I don't remember really running into any bugs even on launch. The only thing bug-wise that I remembered was on the second DLC, The Pit.
Mhm.
I was super excited for it and I downloaded it literally like the minute it hit the marketplace and it was broken beyond all belief when it first came out. They had it patched like a few like within like the day, so I was able to end up playing it. But I remember like right when it came out at like 2 in the morning or something, it was so broken. But other than that, I don't really remember having many issues with Fallout 3.
Yeah, my brother, he played Fallout 3 on 360 also, and, I mean, I think he had a couple of crashes here and there, but nothing egregious. I mean, really and truly, like, 360 PS3 era crashes were not all that uncommon with just about any game at some point. I mean, you might experience just one with some. I felt like you were kinda lucky not to get at least one with just about anything, but 3, he might have had a few more than the average game, but nothing where you were like, "Oh, I got to get rid of this." But PS3, that game crashed all the time. I mean, every couple of hours it felt like it's like, "Oh, here comes another crash," or it would
Make sure you
freeze for about a
save
minute, and it's
often.
like, yeah, it was a hassle. I was like, maybe I'm blaming the game for what PS3's problems were, but I was like, I hate this so much. I can't play this anymore.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, um yeah, I loved the heck out of Skyrim. I could definitely understand where you're coming from when you say I think it's the most overrated game. For me,
And again, I
that
do
would
like it.
be
I like it a lot. I do like
yeah.
it.
I totally agree. I could
It's
love a
just
game
I
as
consider
well
it
and
like
think it's
more like a
overrated.
7 or an 8 out of 10 rather than like, the 10 out of 10 most people call it.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. For me, it's I don't know which one in particular, but basically all of the like modern GT, or I guess there's not really many of them since they've been, but GTA, because like 5 has been kind of like just GTA 5 has been the Skyrim of Rockstar. They just keep
Yeah.
re-releasing it. It's gone through 3 console generations, and they haven't come out with
Mhm.
GTA 6, and we still don't even know when that's happening.
And they
But
didn't even just bother to support a game that could have been its successor, Red Dead 2.
oh, yeah,
They
and Red
basically
Dead has
they
done.
ditched it, the online stuff, so fast, and I'm like,
Oh, did
"Guys,
they?
Red Dead." Yeah, there was supposed to be, like, DLCs and stuff like this that would have kept that going for a while, and just because GTA 5 was still making so much money, they were just like, "Oh, let's just invest all in that and, forget Red Dead 2." And I'm like, "Guys, Red Dead 2 has the potential to be significantly better if you just put your time and money into it," but they didn't do that. I mean, I love GTA 5, don't get me wrong, but I am a massive Red Dead fan.
Okay.
Uh, I love that franchise, and I hate what they're doing with it. I think they treat it like a redheaded stepchild, basically, for some reason. I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard about them porting Red Dead over to
Oh,
PS4
just
for
recently? Yeah.
$50. Oh my gosh. I was like,
I
"You
brought
all
that up on a stream.
suck."
It's like, who is making these decisions? It's like,
Take-Two is the worst.
you
It's
could
like,
play it for, like, you get a used copy on Xbox 360 for, like, $10, and it's gonna be better than what you're paying 50
yeah,
bucks
I
for now.
yeah, if I ever get the new Xbox, I have Red Dead, the original one, just right there on my shelf still, and it will run in 4K. You know, they say 60 FPS. I played it on the Xbox One, and I was like, it's not quite 60 FPS, but it's like 45-ish, and that's pretty solid. I'm like, that's good. I liked it. It looks very nice. It plays great still. But, I was like, "I can play the old version and it'll look better than what you're all offering, and you all want me to pay $50? No."
Yeah,
Even
no
a top
thanks.
5 favorite game of mine isn't worth that. I'll
Yeah.
buy it maybe when it's, like, $15 and it goes on sale.
Yeah, I don't. So I played a heck of a lot of GTA 4 because I am a completionist. So I will play a game well after I'm done wanting to play it. If there are more achievements that I know I can get, Melee K
I've
will give
done
me crap.
that.
Me- Melee K gives me crap about that all the time. Um, because yeah, if I start a game that I think I might enjoy and I end up not enjoying it, if I know I can get the completion, I'm still gonna get the completion on it. So I may end up playing games longer than I want to to get the
I've
completion. 'Cause
I've
I'm a
done this
completionist.
for I've done that. It's funny, I actually started as an achievement hunter on Xbox 360
Okay.
and didn't think trophies would be nearly as fun, but I actually came to like trophies a little bit more just because you get that nice
Hmm.
shiny platinum at the end of it. Um, but, I mean, they're still more or less kinda the same thing. It's just,
Yeah,
uh,
different implementations.
but I've done what you're doing. I'm more or less kind of out of that phase because I was doing that with almost everything I played for a little while, but, uh even before I started my channel, I stopped doing it, and I'm like, I'll still platinum games I really love. Like, From
Hmm.
Software games, I'll platinum those almost on principle just because I love their games so much. But, I don't do that with every game now. I kinda look at it and it's like, "Okay, can I platinum this? Will it be fun?" And if I think it will be, I'll do it. If not, I'll abandon it. Because I know going for trophies almost made me hate one of my favorite games of all time.
Which game
Uh
was that?
the first Ratchet and Clank game.
Okay.
I That game is so much fun. I mean, that whole series just about is great. I mean, there's a couple of, not so great titles. I think the PS4 reboot isn't that good, but
I probably
uh
would have enjoyed that franchise if I had ever gotten
oh
PlayStation.
yeah, yeah, Ratchet and Clank's a blast. And the thing that the reboot took away that kind of hurt it in my opinion was there was kind of more like PG Shrek level humor where it could be like a little bit
Okay.
not for kids, a little bit more like
But you probably
innuendo and
don't
stuff
know it
to.
when you're a kid until you're older.
Yeah, I mean, it had a little bit more of an edge to it that added something to the humor, and they just completely neutered it for the reboot, and I was like, "Yeah, that sucks." But the original one, great game. I was playing the remastered one because that one had trophies, and one of the well, I guess two of them are really, I guess they're interconnected, but you have to get 1,000,000 bolts. That's the currency,
Okay.
and it is it is a terrible grind to try to like you could play the game all the way through, get every single bolt in every single level 7 times, and you still won't quite have enough. because part of what they do is once you go through a level once and get everything, uh they reduce the number of bolts you can get.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah, so it makes it to where it's like you have to play over and over and over and over, and it's like, oh my gosh, why are you all doing this? It got to the point where I was like, these are the only trophies I have left. Is it worth it? And I was like, I've done it this much. I'm gonna go ahead, but
Yeah,
I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to play this game again now because
yeah.
I got so tired of it.
Grind achievements like that just for the sake of grinding
Hmm.
is a huge pet peeve. It's like if I can get all of the other achievements in your game and you have just this one left, it's like get X amount of this, and I've played through the game like 5 times already, and I still have to play through another 5 times just for this one achievement. It's like, screw you guys, I hate you.
Oh my gosh! Like
So
please, have you ever attempted or even considered attempting the ones that Gears of War has? Because I know from what I've heard, those are extremely grindy.
yeah, so it's funny because I had. Are you familiar with Dude 1286?
No.
Okay. So he's another one I had on for open mic a little while ago, and he's also an achievement hunter like me, but he goes for even more difficult and or grindy completions than me. And he has the seriously achievement in Gears 1, 2, and 3. He hasn't
Wow.
done Gears 4 and 5 yet, but they are even each one is worse than the last. And that is the sole reason why I stopped playing Gears after Gears 2 is because of the seriously achievements.
Ugh.
Um, yeah, in Gears 1, seriously, is for getting 10,000 online like multiplayer kills, so it's not like something you can do by yourself.
Mhm.
In Gears 2, it's for getting 100,000. However, it's all kills across the game, regardless whether it's single player or multiplayer. So there are spots in the campaign that you can grind it out. It still
Okay.
takes a while, but there's this one level near the end of the game where you're on a Brumac, which is this giant hulking monster, and it's got machine guns on its arms, and there's just like hundreds of enemies rushing you. So you can get hundreds of kills very quickly, but you just basically got to just keep doing that over and over and over again. So
Right. You can at
that
least
one's
shake it up though en route at least.
yeah. And then Gears 3 is in order to get the seriously, I think you have to get every Onyx medal. And there's like I've only done a little bit of Gears 3. Um I intentionally didn't put Gears 3 on my tag for a long time, and then I accidentally popped an achievement on it because it was what happened? It was I played through it my backup tag, and then I think I logged in with my primary tag while the game was still running, and just logging into my account popped an achievement on my main gamer tag, and I was so pissed.
Wow.
But so I've since started working on getting as many of the achievements as I can, but I've still haven't done a lot in Gears 3 because there's I say like 60% of the Gears 3 multi achievements are in multiplayer and not
Mhm.
single player. But I do know that Seriously 3.0 is for getting all the Onyx medals. I want to say there's like 60 or something of them, and each one has like it starts at like bronze, silver, gold, platinum, Onyx to get, and they're things like get to get like the Onyx level. It's like get 10,000 kills with this gun, or get 5,000 executions with this gun, and you have to do that with like all the medals, so it's nuts. And
Oh
then Gears
gosh.
4 and 5 ramp it up even more. Gears 5 has 2 seriously achievements. There's 5 and 5.1 or something that they added on into a title update after the fact, and I don't believe any of your prior progress even counts towards. So you're basically counting starting from scratch, even after you may have already had the completion of the game. If you got it and played it the heck out of it on launch, like a year later they released this 5.2 seriously achievement, and you basically got to spend another 500 hours getting that one. So that's basically why I stopped Gears,
Man.
because they are the epitome of screw you devs for garbage achievements.
I can't imagine somebody going through all of those because I would assume I've played only a little bit of Gears of War. I would assume those games feel relatively similar. I'm sure there's upgrades to each game as it moves along, but it's like, gosh, if you've got all of those seriously achievements, like,
There
how
are
can
people
you
who've
even
done it.
like this series at this point? It's like you've spent so much of your life doing this. Is it really that good? It
Yeah,
can't be that good.
there are people who are obsessed with Gears.
I
If
guess,
I
yeah.
had
I
to
mean,
put
granted, I've played Mass Effect enough times to where maybe I could get it if it's really that good, but
I was just gonna say, because Mass Effect is my favorite franchise of all time. If I would be okay with something like that in Mass Effect just because I
yeah,
love
I
it.
mean, if they required you to grind your way through Mass Effect, it's like I would probably end up getting a lot of them naturally just because of how often I play it. But it's like as I play it, yeah, I said this before. It's like I play it pretty much once a year minimum.
Nice.
Uh, but
I was just
I mean,
talking
I'd say it's getting
to
the platinum on those is it's actually pretty easy. I got the platinums
yeah,
on all three of the legendary editions. Well, and that's the one I'm referring to. It's not necessarily easy to get it on the
on the
original
original
ones. The
versions.
uh,
Yeah.
Mass Effect One is a bit of a grind, I guess.
Yeah, because of
Uh,
the up companion achievements.
yeah, yeah. I mean, granted, I loved the game. I mean, I loved the game despite. Granted, it had Mass Effect One was the toughest one to go back to its old version because it was
Yep.
the most dated of them. But it also had elements that I loved, and that game especially was the one I wanted the Legendary Edition for. And
Because of the upgrades that they changed
yeah,
to
and
it.
they did I have to give EA/BioShock credit. They did a
BioWare.
BioWare. I've got BioShock on the brain because I might start playing that soon. But
Okay.
uh which by the way, anyone goes to my community section, I'm having a vote right now on what I'm going to start playing tomorrow. Right now it's between Deathloop is in the poll, but it got no votes. It's pretty much between the BioShock trilogy and Returnal.
I voted for Returnal.
Okay,
So if there's
because
one vote on Returnal, that was me.
it's like it's neck and neck right now. I think it's something like 4-4 or 5-5 at this point. But yeah,
That's a
it's
game
like
I
I mean
wish was on Xbox. I would love to play Returnal.
yeah, it looks pretty dang cool. I'm fine with either one winning, but we'll see what happens. But yeah,
But
as far as
you like the
BioWare
changes
is
that they
concerned,
made to Mass Effect 1?
I love them. I
What are
yeah,
they?
I'm
Because I
not
haven't played the
positive.
Legendary Edition yet.
I highly recommend playing it because put it this way. Okay, so I probably would say I'm like most people before the Legendary Edition. I would consider 2 or 3 the best of the series. Uh, Mass Effect
Most
1
people
might be the
consider
best one
2.
now.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
most people
Because
consider
most
2. I actually usually leaned 3 because even though, yeah, the ending is kind of, it's got some issues. I don't hate it as much as some people do. I don't hate it at all. I have
yeah.
issues with it. But
Yeah. I talk
'cause
about it a
I
lot
guess my
because
expectations for what the ending would be weren't the same as everyone else. I never thought
okay.
it was going to be this branching, open-ended, 50 possible endings type thing. I kind of always expected it would narrow into a bottleneck, in maybe a few different ways. So, I mean, granted, I don't necessarily like all of the endings for where they go in each way. I think there should have been a better way to let Shepard survive. Uh, but on the whole, I still love the game. But with the Legendary Edition, one might be the best now. It
That's awesome.
they did such a good job updating the gameplay. The graphics are beautiful, and it has the previously held elements. Kind of it's the most RPG of the series by far,
Yes.
and the way that works now with the gameplay, with the graphics, with just how nicely it moves I'm not positive yet because I've only played the Legendary Edition the one time, but it might now be my favorite because
Nice.
some of my favorite moments from that trilogy are right there in that game. And I mean, my favorite moment from the trilogy is still in Mass Effect 1, which is when you first meet Sovereign.
Okay. Yeah, that was
I remember the first time I played that game and like I think my brother had come over to visit in my apartment. I was playing that, and he was like, "Okay, this looks pretty cool." And we're watching, and you have that first encounter with Sovereign, and you basically, I had no idea this was going to be a series. So when you encounter him and he starts talking to you, and you just get the scope of what you're facing in this one conversation, I have never been so intimidated just superficially with a villain. It's like if you never really, it's like, okay, I don't know what it's going to be like to fight this thing,
yeah.
but just on a story level in a game, I was like, I'm genuinely intimidated by this thing. There's no way we can beat this right now. This has to be a series. Because I
Yeah,
was just like, how do you beat something like what this is describing? This is nuts.
the whole planet of Vermeer was like a game changer for me when it came to like RPGs. It was just like
Yeah.
blew my mind.
I mean,
Yeah.
like the music for that is so good. I love the Mass Effect soundtrack entirely, 1 through 3. I love it. Uh I think like you said, Vermeer is such a great love. It's like for all the love that the suicide mission gets for being the best level of the trilogy. And granted, I probably still would agree that that's the best overall level.
Agreed.
But Vermeer is not far from like I tend to think that Vermeer is
Doesn't get the
probably my
recognition it
third
deserves.
favorite. I think it's the third best overall mission in the trilogy. I
Okay.
think, and to Mass Effect 2's credit, I think it's got two of the three. Uh,
What I was gonna say, what would be the other one that would fill out your top three?
the other one is when they first go onto the collector's ship.
Okay.
That is just perfect tension building. The just everything you're learning about how the collectors have Prothean DNA, the music is just so creepy and ominous, and then you're learning, oh, they're basically, processing all these people. They've got all of these pods spread out throughout the ship. That is just perfect tension building. I absolutely love that. I was like, that's up there to me for like the best sci-fi. It's so good. It's
Yeah.
so good. And I
Agreed.
love that you can play it and it can feel different kind of each time you play it, depending on who you bring with you. I think that's really, really cool. You get all these varying perspectives. That's so awesome.
What's up, Vanquish? Thanks for hopping in and saying hi. Yeah, right now we just happen to be on the topic of Mass Effect. We're all over the place, so yeah, I
It
don't
was
really have
always going
a
to eventually circle to Mass Effect. We have a shared appreciation for it.
yes. Yeah, it pretty much can't not come up very often because it is also my favorite franchise of all time. Mass Effect 3 is my single favorite game of all time. But yeah, like you said, disappointed in the ending. It fumbled it at the 1 yard line, as someone said recently, and I definitely agree with that. But the game was
Mhm.
fantastic in like every other regard. And for me, it was like, it was more the journey than the destination. The whole franchise is just amazing.
Yeah, because it does annoy me a bit, like when people act like an ending can ruin an entire thing. It's like, okay, with a movie you could make that argument because that's much shorter and contained.
Yeah,
I think with a game, I would have a hard time making that kind of an argument because I'm like, okay, look at all the things Mass Effect 3 does right. I
exactly.
mean,
A lot of
there's
people
some
overlook that.
spectacular stuff that happens in that story. And then I'm like, okay, if you look at the conclusions of Mass Effect 3, it's like, okay, it doesn't go exactly the way I want, but is it a bad like if it, okay, say if you pulled pick which one of them is your favorite, if there was never an idea of a choice for what the ending would that actually be a bad ending to the whole thing? Would it still make sense? I think the endings still more or less work in that sense. The only, I mean, again, I think maybe the mechanics of how it comes about is kind of an issue, like the whole the catalyst thing. I'm like, yeah, the whole Prothean catalyst thing kind of feels like it's pulled out of a hat. You can tell, okay, the writers and the people making this were rushed by EA. It probably we would have gotten a very different game if BioWare had never been bought. But
Probably.
I think as they did as good a job as they could do under the circumstances, and given what we got, I'm like, I'm still mostly pretty dang satisfied with 3. I still love it overall. I think it gets most of its moments really right. It's just that
Yeah,
ending, it's like, that was the hard part. That it was kind of impossible to rush that and get it right.
yeah. One of the other things that really helped make it even better for me is the multiplayer. Did you ever play the multiplayer?
It's I've never been a big multiplayer person, but I love Mass Effect 3's multiplayer.
Yeah,
I
I'm
wish
not
the
big on
Legendary Edition would
multiplayer.
have had that. It's the only thing I wish they'd have done is keep the multiplayer.
Yeah, I've never been big on multiplayer. Probably the most I ever actually played of like actual multiplayer was probably in like hey, days of Halo 3 and Halo Reach. Other than that, I don't do a lot of like versus multiplayer because I just don't really enjoy it that much. So when it's like co-op stuff, like you and friends versus the game, I am so down with that. So
Same.
I love the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, and I still play it regularly, probably a couple times a month with one of my buddies because we just love it so much. Um, but yeah, I
It's
was
it's
very
funny
disappointed
because
when they didn't bring it to the Legendary Edition.
it's funny because it's not an overly complex multiplayer system. It's just it plays so well that you have a great time with it. And even though it's not competitive multiplayer, which I agree with you, I'm not a big fan of competitive multiplayer, but playing with people, having a singular mission, I think that works well enough. But they added kind of a competitive component to it, with
With
how
the
they
scoring.
score each individual, and I'm like, and that's just kind of for bragging rights if you want to play it that way. And I'm like, that works fine. That works
Yeah, me
just
and my
fine.
buddy, we're always fighting over the top leaderboard spot. So,
Yeah.
and because we've been playing it for, it came out in 2012, so like 11 years now. So if someone comes in and like beats us, it's like, oh my god, that's impressive.
And granted, the loot box thing is stupid, but the funny thing is, if you just eliminate that, the multiplayer is so fun on it that it's like, gosh, you never needed to add the loot box thing in order to make it good. Granted, that's not the reason they did that for money, but uh,
The one
grinding through
thing
the
that
various characters is actually not. That's actually pretty fun if you
Yeah,
just do
because
that
you can
naturally.
fill out most of your stuff relatively quickly, especially if you're playing with someone who's good and you can play at a higher difficulty level. Play a lot of silver just because that's like the best one where it can still be decently difficult. It's not
Mm-hmm.
too easy, but you're not basically gonna spend use all your consumable equipment. You're not basically gonna die all the time. But
Yeah.
we play a lot of gold too, depending on how many people we have and what classes we want to play at the time. But
Well, the game did a
um,
really good job of matchmaking too. So it's like if you were starting on that lower level, I mean, I never minded when I'd get lower level people when I started to get better at, because I'm like, yeah, that's fine. We'll carry you through this. We'll help you get yourself. It was a pretty mostly you'd get pretty supportive people, but usually you would just get matched with people of a similar skill level, and you'd be just kind of going along doing it together. Uh, grinding your way up the ranks at the same time. But yeah,
yeah, the
that was a really well done multiplayer that I'm surprised they didn't keep for the Legendary Edition.
yeah, the one thing that I would have made a change to. What's up, Paul Hadukian, my good buddy? Thank you for joining me. Hey, we are currently on the topic of Mass Effect. I know, shocker, right? I
Me,
don't think I brought it up either. I think Gord King did. Uh,
I found a way.
But the one thing that I would have changed, that would have made the loot box. I mean, it probably wouldn't have made them as much money. I have no idea how much money they actually made on it. I never spent a cent on the loot boxes. I've only ever used in-game currency for it. But the one thing that I would have changed, instead of opening a loot box and getting like, here, you got this gun or this upgrade or whatever. If instead of that, it gave you like tokens and then you could redeem those in the store for whatever you wanted, would have made
Yeah.
it way better. So it's like, oh, I like this gun. I want to upgrade this gun specifically rather than having to just keep buying the pack until I happen to get that specific gun to upgrade it more.
I want to
That would have
say
been the thing
I did buy a loot box, I think, early, thinking that you could do something like that. But then when I realized, oh, it's still random. I was like, that seems a bit predatory. I mean, this was kind of in the early days of loot boxes.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
funny because the whole loot box fiasco didn't show up until many years later. Like, it's like, that was in Mass Effect 3 all the way back in
Yeah, it's like
2012,
I'm
but
like,
like
guys,
no
yo,
one
this has been
mentioned it
around a
for
little longer than
years.
you all might know. But it's like they were kind of doing that in this game. EA had its dirty little paws on that long before Battlefront.
Yeah, well, before Battlefront, the big one that I remember being a big loot box controversy was Shadow of War, Middle Earth.
Did they? I didn't know that
Yeah,
necessarily.
they actually patched it out of the game after the fact.
Oh,
So I didn't end up playing Middle Earth Shadow of War until after they patched it out. So I've never experienced all of the loot
I didn't
boxes.
realize Shadow of War had multiplayer.
It's not multiplayer. It's just you get these loot boxes because after you basically beat the campaign, the
Mhm.
third act of the game is the Shadow Wars, and you're basically trying to build up armies and conquer basically the entire land because there's all these different fortresses. You have to conquer them all, and while you're trying to conquer others, your other ones will get invaded. So you have to put strong uh, troops there to defend the ones you've already conquered. Otherwise, you might lose it and have to reconquer it again. And in order to complete it, you have to conquer all of them simultaneously. And so you're always getting the originally you were getting these loot boxes with all these different level orcs and stuff. I think it's kind of similar to the loot boxes in sports games, but because it
Wow.
was such a big fiasco, they ended up patching it out.
Yeah, that's pretty
But
messed
I
up.
didn't
Doing that in
play
a single player game. My gosh.
Yeah, I didn't play Shadow of War until after they patched that out, so I never experienced any of it. I still need to go back because I need to complete that. I completed the story and I've done the DLC, but I haven't done that Act 3 where it's
Mhm.
called the Shadow Wars. You have to complete that. I haven't done that part yet.
I've played
I did
Shadow of Mordor. I haven't played what is it? Shadow of
Shadow of
War?
yeah, Shadow of Mordor was the first one. I love that
Right.
one. I played it twice,
That was
both
really good. I liked it. That was a good
the
game.
original release and the Game of the Year edition. I played it twice because I love that one. I don't like Shadow of War as much, but there is a lot more to it. They really
Mhm.
fleshed out more of the Nemesis system, and the different, kind of like I was talking about earlier with the Infinity Blade, where each orc has different strengths and weaknesses that you need to prepare for accordingly. So they really flesh that out a lot more in Shadow of War. So if you like Shadow of Mordor, I would definitely recommend playing it. Um,
Yeah, I
but I,
have it. It's just a game I've yet to get around to. I know my
I
brother, one of my brothers, uh, he liked it quite a lot. He's probably even a bigger Lord of the Rings nerd than I am. Um,
yeah, if
but
you're
he's
a
younger
huge
too, so
Lord of the Rings fan, I I wouldn't go into it with the expectation of it being like the story like being canon, because I
it
don't think it
only
really.
has to be better than Rings of Power.
Okay, it's definitely better than that, but that's a very low bar to pass.
Yeah, that bar is resting below sea level.
Yeah, it's such
By
a
the
Disney
way, Chad, if you head
trilogy.
over to my channel, I just dropped a video about episode 1 of Rings of Power. Uh,
I put that in my playlist to watch. I don't know if I'll get to
yeah,
it
you have to
tonight, but I
set
will be
aside about
watching
an
that
hour
soon.
or 13 minutes, but and there are some audio issues. It's kind of my first foray into video essay, and I was using new editing software, so it has some technical issues that couldn't quite work out in time. But I mean, the feedback I've still gotten is pretty strong. I've even gained a few subscribers off of it so far in its
Cool.
initial time, so that's good. I'm closing in on 600.
Nice. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely better than that, but the story doesn't quite make sense. But I believe it's supposed to take place between The Hobbit and Fellowship of the Ring, is where I believe
right.
it's supposed to be. But yeah, definitely a fun game, and I would recommend it. But I did
Nice.
like Shadow of Mordor a little better. But that was like the first big game I remember loot boxes being a big controversy. But it's like everyone's all up in arms about it. It's like Mass Effect 3 had them, 3 or 4 years ago, and no one said anything about it. So it's like,
I
why
think
is this
I want to
one
say that
a
like
problem?
I think honestly that like the first games I ever remember doing that kind of thing was probably the 2K games. At least that I had a lot of attention. I didn't. I mean, I guess after the Mass Effect thing, when I tried it once and realized, okay, this probably isn't a good idea to do that. It seems, a little too much like you're gambling. I didn't think much about it after that, and so I almost disassociated that from the game. But then, yeah, when it started to become a major controversy, I was like, "This isn't new." It's like this really isn't new. Now, granted, the 2K games weren't as they were a little bit more balanced when they were doing it. It was kind of seen like as a shortcut to get what you would already get pretty
Pay to
quickly.
win.
Like, cause I used to play the NBA 2K games quite a bit.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, when I first heard
for at
about
least
loot boxes in
a
sports
very good
games, I was
stretch
like,
at
how does
least.
that even work?
Yeah, I mean, well, what they would do is like, I think it was around 2K11, and I'd say probably from 2K11 to 2K15 is when I was pretty well into NBA 2K. I haven't been big into the NBA since like the late 90s, back when Michael Jordan was playing,
Yeah.
but I did love good basketball games, and 11 to 15 is a pretty great era for that.
Okay.
But what they did that made the game so appealing, aside from some of the other stuff, was they had a my career mode where you'd create a player and you would basically just control them, and it was done really really well, and you would just slowly but surely build up your character stats and make them go from being kind of a low level player to a great player, and
Okay.
you could buy the currency to upgrade your player and shortcut your way there, or you could just do it naturally, which naturally didn't take all that long. You could be, and plus if you're playing enough, you get skilled enough to where the stats aren't going to matter all that much. They kind of make you a little overpowered by the time you're getting into the high 80s, low 90s. You get a little too good. But yeah, like probably around 2K16 or 17,
That's when they made it like
they
they
started to
really.
really pull back on what you could do naturally, and it's where
It's
it's like,
like,
gosh, you've really got to buy your way into a good character. It sucked. It was
okay, yeah, that
terrible.
makes sense. Like, yeah, you can play it without spending any money, but you're not going to be able to get anywhere near as high as you can if
No.
you actually
And
spend
plus they
real
had
money.
added like
It's
some,
dirty.
yeah, they'd added like I guess I can't remember. It was called like, I think it was called like open court or something like that, where your my career character could play against other my career characters in like 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and it wasn't bad. It was actually kind of fun to do, but the problem was is that it was at that same time to where you had to buy your way into being good, and you've got these players playing that are like have bought their way to like being like a 90, and you're stuck
The
at like the
whales.
high 60s, low 70s. It's like, good luck. Better.
Yeah,
It's like you're gonna basically have to pay your way into these games if you're gonna have any effect. It's terrible. And I was like, well,
yeah,
I'm done
that's
with this
dirty.
series.
Yeah, um, I don't know if it was that bad, but yeah, with the whole Battlefront debacle, I also didn't play Battlefront 2 until after those microtransactions were patched out of the game as well. So
Mhm.
the all of my experience with Battlefront 2, the new Battlefront 2 was really enjoyable because I didn't play it till after that the loot boxes, so I never experienced that. But I never played the new Battlefront 1, so I don't know how that was. But I
I
remember
played a
it didn't
little
have
bit of the new Battlefront one.
I
I
don't
mean,
think it
there's
had loot boxes in it because I don't remember hearing about
I
them
mean,
until
it
Battlefront
had. I
2.
mean, I'm pretty sure it did. It just wasn't as egregious. I
Agreed.
think it.
Okay.
I'd have to go back to make sure it was, but I mean, it wasn't really a great game to begin with. It was pretty, and the sound design was excellent on it. Uh, but it was really glitchy. It had its own issues. But I played a little bit of Battlefront 2 recently because they gave that away on PS Plus some time ago, and I wanted
Okay.
to see how the campaign was. Uh, Pretty
Yeah, I got it.
glitchy, to be honest. Pretty glitchy, to be honest. I thought it was kind of funny how glitchy it was. I mean, it had some fun stuff about it, but I kind of tuned out after about 4 or 5 missions. I was like, it's not doing it for me.
Yeah,
There
I
are
got it.
better older Star Wars games I could play.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, I got it because a couple of my buddies were really into it, and I got to just play with them, and we had a lot of fun. There's many game types in Battlefront 2 that I've never even played because we always just played the
Same.
same game type. I don't even remember which one it was. It's been a while since I played it. But yeah, there's a bunch of game types I've never even played in Battlefront 2.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't give it a whole lot of my time. I mean, it's just I guess when I play a Star Wars game, I mean, it's fun to play with all the games and all that stuff, with all the different like guns and whatnot. But generally speaking, when I play Star Wars, I kind of want to be the one holding the lightsaber. That's more
Yeah.
fun for me, or in the case of like Knights of the Old Republic, more driving a really cool story or something.
Yeah, as Vanquish says, yeah, Battlefront 2 is much better now. Yeah, it's
And yeah,
light
and it
years
may
ahead
be
of what.
much better than it was. I never played it in its early stages. I've
Yeah,
only gotten
same.
to it in the later stages, just even its later stage, I was like, okay, it's not a terrible game, but it's not really doing it for me. So
Yeah, but yeah, definitely light years better than it was when it launched.
yeah.
So have you, just for my own knowledge, because this might play into something in my channel somewhere down the line, have you played a lot of the Star Wars games?
I mean, I've played a fair few. Not a ton of the more recent ones, but like I've played, KOTOR 1 and 2, love those. Uh Played I actually really I'm an apologist for the episode 1 Pod Racer racing
Oh, I
game.
love that game.
I love that game. Um my favorite Star Wars game of all time though would be Shadows of the Empire on
Okay.
N64. I that
Hasn't
was
aged great, but that was a fun
Yeah,
game.
it's not aged great, but for its time, it was wonderful. I loved it. It's definitely not a game I would ever like go back to actually play because I've watched it. And I'm like, yeah, this would probably be pretty terrible to go back to, but I have very fond memories of it.
Me
And
too.
it came around. I was playing it just as I was really getting into Star Wars as a kid. Uh, and I played like Jedi Outcast 2. That was a great one,
Yeah,
especially if you
Jedi.
had the cheats and mods that allow dismemberment. I mean,
Yeah,
granted, they were pretty ridiculous because I mean they were realistic, but they were ridiculous because you literally you wouldn't even have to swing your lightsaber if you just ran into somebody,
yeah, that's one of the great
including
things about it.
yeah,
Jedi
including an NPC
Outcast.
you were supposed to protect. It's like, whoops, just cut them in half. It
Yeah, it
was
was the
kind of funny.
G_Saber realistic combat 1 or something like that
Yeah,
was the
now you're
code.
saying it, and I'm like, "Yep, that's what it was." But,
Something along those lines. But yeah, Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy are my favorite Star Wars games of all
mhm,
times because they're the only ones where lightsabers act like actual lightsabers.
yeah, and then there was the, Rogue Squadron, that was great.
Love the heck out of Rogue
I think
Squadron
the
and Rogue
GameCube Rogue
Leader.
Squadron still holds up pretty well,
Rogue
and,
Leader was
uh, and
fantastic game.
yeah, but, like, the old N64 ones, gosh, those were fun. Those were so much fun. I mean, I think gameplay-wise, they could port those over, and they'd still be pretty fun to play. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
they don't
definitely.
look necessarily all that pretty, although the GameCube one does.
GameCube one
Uh,
still probably would look fine, but yeah, the
yeah, if you could,
N64
yeah, if
one
you just
definitely
did a regular,
would look pretty dated.
remaster of that, just give it a nice fresh HD coat of paint, I think it'd be pretty
Basically,
good.
pull a Metroid Prime remastered on it would be
Sure.
fantastic.
Yeah. You did that, you'd be home free. You'd have a pretty solid Star Wars title right in your library, and people would eat that up because it's a
Yes.
dang good game.
I would, yeah, I don't have, do you have a Switch?
I do.
Okay, I don't have one. I've been looking into it recently and conversing with some people who are very well versed in the Nintendo ecosystem. But with the, yeah, like we were saying earlier, with all the rumors about a new Switch coming out soon, I'm like, I'm gonna hold off.
Yeah.
But there are a number of games that I would will I'm gonna get a Switch specifically for. The first and foremost is Metroid Dread because it's the only Metroid game I haven't played.
Really? Yeah. It's funny. I was very late to the Metroid party myself. Prime, I think, was the very first one I ever played.
Okay.
And initially, even now, I don't think I've ever actually finished it. Because I kept like once I got into it, I was like, okay, I really like this, but then I kept bouncing between them, and I was like, I need to pick one and just get fixated on it.
I
Uh,
Yeah,
so I think once I
Metroid.
figure out how to stream Switch games, either by just recording them and then posting them, or figure out how to do it through OBS, I'll probably start doing more Switch games then, because a lot of them I have the remaster of Prime, and
Nice.
I've played a good amount of it so
Definitely
far.
play it. It's the I Metroid is definitely my favorite Nintendo franchise, that and
Okay,
Zelda. But I am a huge Metroidvania enthusiast, so I've played
nice.
that's like my genre of speciality. But because I don't have a Switch yet, I have not played Dread. But I'm definitely looking forward to it because I've heard it's very, very good.
Yeah, I've played a little bit of it. It's pretty dang cool. It's pretty cool. I also like their yearly pass. I know there's like a $50 one where you get access to N64 games. I only have the $20 one where you get
Okay.
in
Yeah,
N64, or not. We get Super Nintendo and Nintendo games.
I was just
Uh,
looking into that this last week.
we had a earlier this year we had a 3 or 4 day power outage, and having a Switch helped me not lose my mind.
You were able to keep it powered? Do you have
Yeah, well, yeah, because
a generator?
it had full power initially, so I was like, okay, I can play it now, and I had a car charger, so I could charge it that way, and my
Oh, on your
phone,
car.
and I kept it going that way. But yeah, that was a tough few days, but
Oh my
Super
goodness.
Punch Out and Metroid Prime, they helped a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. That would- I would not want to be without power for that long.
That sucked, and it was because of wind. It was because
What?
of wind.
Oh my goodness.
Wind knocked out our power. We were beaten by wind.
Was it like crazy wind or was it just like
I mean, it was crazy wind for Kentucky. Like
okay?
it was like 65-mile-an-hour wind,
Oh
which
wow, yeah, that's
not typical for us. I mean, we've had some windy days here before, but it was 5 miles an hour stronger than our worst, and it crippled the city for 3 or 4 days. It was
oh my
weird.
goodness,
Like most of the city had lost power. It's
that's
like
nuts.
it's like y'all really the wind really y'all have no preparation for the wind at all. It's okay.
I'm
Thanks.
glad you were able to have something to keep you occupied during that time. So, oh, and Vanquish has something similar. Steam Deck helps keep him sane on trips. I've
Yeah, I heard
definitely
those are
looked
pretty
into a Steam
cool.
Deck as well. I've heard good things. Although, if I was to get a handheld PC like that, I probably there's a new one that just came out or it hasn't come out yet that I've heard of that I don't know anything about. I have to look into it. I don't remember what it's called, but the one that came out after the Steam Deck, because I think the Steam Deck is built on Linux, but the ROG Ally is built on Windows,
Okay.
which means it has the Xbox app. So it's definitely more Xbox friendly for Game Pass and streaming games and stuff. So if I was to get a portable PC like that, I'd probably do the ROG Ally, but I don't see me probably ever doing that, especially if I'm going to get a Switch at
Yeah.
some point or Switch Pro or whatever the next one's going to be called. But one thing, because we are kind of getting here close to the 90-minute mark, that I wanted to ask you about is what that you've been playing lately, because I've heard a little bit about it from my party chat co-host Mark the Cyborg, but I saw you were, I hopped into your stream last night. You've been playing a lot of Armored Core 6 lately.
Yes, I have. I actually, for the moment, I wrapped that game up just because pretty much getting the platinum is just kind of doing a lot of the same stuff again. There's a few different missions, including the ending is different. That's kind of what you're working for. So I might do a one-time stream a little bit further down the line when I'm getting ready to platinum it, because I am still playing it off stream. But yeah, Armored Core 6, I had an absolute blast doing. It has a lot of replayability. It has a deceptively cool story. I mean, it's very easily, if you're not paying attention, to just think it's kind of just a superficial element, kind of driving forward, just an action game. But actually, there's a pretty decent amount of depth to it that makes it kind of cool to get into. It's the first Armored Core game I've ever played, but I think From
Okay. Yeah, I've
Software.
not played any before either.
Yeah, I had never played them. I haven't played a ton of mech games in general. I think the only one that I played otherwise is Zone of the Enders games, which there were 2 of those.
Okay.
Which those were solid. I liked those okay, but this is far superior to those.
Cool.
But the level of how customizable your mech is, the boss fights are really good. Really strong level design. It is challenging, but
That's
I
what I wanted to
think
ask you about. I've heard it's
yeah,
really difficult.
I mean, compared to other From Software games, I don't think it's all that bad just because of the way it's designed. I'm amazed how many people are griping about the difficulty, because I'm like, guys, if you're not griping about like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, those, then this should be no big deal at all, because it's like you're
Those
in
are the
those
more
games you
difficult.
have to do. I mean, if you don't have a shortcut unlocked, you're kind of doing the whole level over again. So, and there's no other checkpoints along the way for a lot of those games. Elden Ring, there's a good amount, but uh, the other games that are a little less forgiving. Armored Core, most of the missions just run a few minutes. I mean, you can have most missions done in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then you just move on to
Okay.
the next one. But okay, if you're losing a boss fight over and over, it's like, okay, then just go back and do it again, and you're right at the boss fight. You really don't have to do anything else if you're losing
No,
to a
not a
boss.
ton of backtracking like in some of the other
No, I mean,
Souls-born games.
if I'm not mistaken, if you're losing to a boss, there's no backtracking unless you, I guess, unless you quit. I mean, if you quit, you'll have to backtrack and do the whole level again, but the levels are pretty simple. I mean,
Okay.
that's probably, I guess, if there's an issue that people could point out, I guess it would be that the actual levels are far easier than the bosses. So it almost kind of feels like the
They're
levels
not
themselves are
properly
almost just
equipping you to fight the
yeah.
boss.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're not, they're almost just precursors to the boss itself. It's like you're going through the level and just kind of blowing up things pretty easily at a certain point, and then you get to the boss, and the spike in difficulty is pretty enormous. There's a lot less danger of dying during a level, whereas the other From Software games, you could easily die during those levels because the levels are almost as hard as the boss itself.
Okay.
But I think Armored Core 6 is a blast. I have had a great time with it. Uh, yeah, I'm not tired of it at all. I think it's a really, really good game.
Oh,
I'd probably rate it pretty highly
yeah,
overall.
looking at it here on Xbox, it looks like it's out of 5, it's just a 4.6. So for some reason, I didn't have it on my wish list. Not that it's been out for very long, but yeah, mech games are cool. So I'm definitely interested in playing it at some point. But like I said earlier, I've got hundreds of games in my backlog, so I don't know when I would get to it. But I definitely
It's
am interested.
definitely worth. I mean, I paid full price. I got it day one because I was in the middle of streaming all of the From Software games from the 7th gen on, PS3 era on, and
Okay.
I was in Elden Ring, and I was like, okay, well, Armored Core is getting ready to come out, so I could kind of complete this series of From Software games that way. So I figured, what the heck, I'll go ahead and buy it. I've never played a game like this, but we'll give it a whirl. And I know some people hit a wall with that very first boss because similar
That's
to
what
the
I've
other
heard.
levels, it's a massive spike in difficulty. But I'm like, guys, if you have any familiar with From Software games, you kind of knew it was going to get hard at some point. But once you figure it out, it's not bad. It's a blast though. It's absolutely a blast.
So it sounds like you're pretty well versed in the From Software games. Is
Hmm.
that fair to say?
I'd say so.
Which From Soft game has been your favorite?
Overall, I would probably lean towards Bloodborne. I
Okay.
think, which I know
That's
that's
the
unfortunate
PlayStation
for.
exclusive one, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's unfortunate for Xbox players that they're pretty much never gonna get Bloodborne because, granted, the style of Bloodborne's play is similar to the Souls games and similar to Elden Ring, uh, but it's the gameplay perfects those styles because it's a little more faster paced. They've got a really good mechanic to where if you get hit, the damage that you take holds for a second, and you can actually gain it back by hitting the enemy kind of quickly. You can recover some of your health if you hit them a few times. So
Okay.
it's this really cool system they've got for doing that. It's got really interesting lore. The level design is spectacular. The music is incredible. Uh, it's very immersive. It's the first From Software game I ever played, and
Okay.
I absolutely love it. I think I've played it probably like 6, 7 times. I love it. It's
Nice.
great.
And it's I'm assuming so since you said all the ones from like the most recent generation. Because the one that I'm most looking forward to playing at some point is Sekiro. Do you play Sekiro?
I love Sekiro. I
Okay.
actually I it's funny because the first time I played it, because it's drastically different
That's what I've
in
heard.
certain respects from the other games. I mean, it has similarities, but the way the game is played is like I would not recommend anyone play Sekiro the first time in the midst of other Souls games because your muscle memory will be this is a Souls game. I have to play it like a Souls game. Can't play it like a Souls game. Its
Okay.
gameplay does it's very unforgiving to that style because it's the Souls games and Bloodborne are very much about picking your spots, knowing when to dodge, knowing when to counter, knowing how many times you should hit this boss before backing away from it and letting it do its thing. Sekiro is basically counter. It's like, deflect with good timing, counter with good timing. Uh it's paced very different. It's the first playthrough of Sekiro is brutal. I mean, you got to be ready to get your butt kicked a lot because that first
So
playthrough is brutal. And yet the odd thing is his subsequent playthroughs are super easy. They are
okay.
super easy. Like it's strange how easy the game becomes after you've beaten it once because you've basically got the timing down. So granted, if you get hit, it's a lot less forgiving, but you get so good at deflecting that it becomes hard to hit you, especially if you're playing
Nice.
it back to back to back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm expecting it to be hard, but I think I'm up for it because one of my other favorite games of all time is Ninja Gaiden Black, which is
Nice.
a very, very difficult hack and
Yeah, I would
slash.
say
So
Sekiro has a pretty decent amount in common with that game.
yeah, so I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love Sekiro when I get to it. But yeah, Vanquish says that in regards to Armor Core 6, he really wants to play it, but not dying for it. Looking forward to it at Christmas. I'm kind of in the same boat. I won't get
Mhm.
it that soon, but I'm in that same boat. But he also says he grew up playing Mech Warrior. And I actually talked
Nice.
about Mech Warrior on Open Mic last week because I was going through my CD tray here, and one of my discs in there is Mech Warrior 4, which is the only Mech Warrior game I've played. But I really enjoyed that game. I didn't play a ton of it, but I played a good chunk of it. And I love how customized you can make your mechs in that game. It was awesome.
It's
So it
funny
sounds
because
like Armored Core 6 is very similar to that.
yeah, I mean, and it's funny because the first time I ever bought an Xbox, one of the Mech Warrior games was one of the earliest games I bought, and
I
yet
was
for some
just,
reason I never quite got around to playing it. I think I want
was
to
it on
say
the
that
original Xbox?
yeah,
It was Mech Assault,
Mech Assault. Okay, yeah,
which is a dumbed down version of Mech Warrior because
okay.
it's basically you pick a mech and go into battle. You can't customize it at all.
Ah,
I played the demo of it, and because I had played the PC version of Mech Warrior, where you can customize your mechs, I was a little disappointed by that. But from what I heard, it was actually a pretty good game.
mhm. Like I never quite got around to it because I think that was around the time we got Burnout 3, which still would like. I'm not a big fan of racing games, but maybe that's why I
Is that
love
a
Burnout
racing
3.
game or is that a crashing game?
Yeah, I mean both, and it's
Yes.
spectacular. And it's one of those games that unfortunately, even if they remade it or remastered it, it wouldn't be as good because part of what made it so good was you could customize your own soundtrack. And
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
just I mean, because that was a feature of the original Xbox is you could download your own music and you could play that during certain games. So getting to play Burnout, well, like me and my brother would literally we every day when we'd get home, me from work, him from school, we would compete with each other to see who could get the most takedowns. We'd be playing like music from various animes, or and I'm not even a big anime fan, but their music is great. but
Okay,
or just various other soundtracks, that anything that sounded high speed, we put into the soundtrack, and
that's
we would
awesome.
just be doing takedown mode. And when they did the next Burnout, takedown mode got taken away. I
I
was
was
like,
just gonna
why
say
did y'all
I
do
haven't
that?
played any of the Burnout games, but one of my best buddies, he's played them all, so I've heard a lot about Burnout from him, and he's like, "Yeah, they got like, the takedown mode was like a game changer for racing
It was the
games,
best
and then they
mode
took
in
it
the
out."
game by far. It
It's
was
like, "Why would you
so
do
good.
that?"
And I guess because I guess they saw themselves as more of a racing game. And I was like, so takedown mode was all about, it wasn't about racing. It was just how many opposing cars can you destroy before your own car is too wrecked to continue. It was so much fun. And my brother and I got really good at it.
Did they
Uh,
end up adding it back in a subsequent game, or has it
Not
not
that I'm
come
aware
back
of.
since?
I
Okay.
think there's kind of a mini takedown mode in Paradise, but I don't
Was that the
like.
last one?
I think so. I think so. And I one of the trends that racing games went into that I hate is where the whole game is on a giant track and you're driving to the various tracks.
Okay.
Um,
I kinda like that.
I mean, it's a fine option to have in certain games, but I don't like it being a staple. I kind of like, just you pick a track on the screen, you get taken to it, you go race and everything. I don't mind the open world element being an element, but it's like it's the whole game. And it's like, okay, I don't think that's quite as fun. It's kind of annoying. It's kind of tedious, especially because you can't really fast travel to these various spots, or it's like, I just
Yeah,
want to
I
get to
get
this
that.
area. Uh, but I mean, granted, I think Paradise is a really, really fun game, but Takedown, that's king. That is the best
And
racing game ever made.
which Burnout was that in? Was that Revenge or was that 3?
Takedown mode, Burnout 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally called Burnout 3 Takedown.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it
They
had that
literally
takedown
named the game
subtitle.
after the mode, and then they took the mode out, and I'm like, you all
So,
suck.
Revenge then, because that's one that came after, right? That's when they got rid of it?
Yes.
Okay, and then it wasn't in Paradise either.
No, well, I mean, it's like I think Paradise has Takedown, and it's just it doesn't play the same.
It's not the same
It's
thing.
not it's not nearly as well done.
Okay, that makes sense.
Though again, part of that is just the lack of customizable soundtrack. I mean, they have a solid soundtrack for that game, but it gets a little mundane after a while because it's like it's not your musical sensibilities all the time. It's whatever theirs are.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vanquish says that his gateway was to Souls was Elden Ring, and he's currently playing Liza P, which just came out, I believe, yesterday or today. So
Yeah, it
cool.
can't. Yeah, I'm
I
looking forward
know
to playing that.
a lot of people have been looking forward to that because it's another Souls game, and it's on Game Pass. So if you got Game Pass, you get it for free. And Sekiro kicked his ass, which I don't think
Yeah,
there's anyone who didn't get their ass kicked by Sekiro who's actually played it. Would be my guess. So I'm curious to hear about the consensus of Liza P and how people are liking that. I don't think I'll probably ever play it, but I'm just curious to hear how what the general consensus is on it.
I'm curious about kind of both sides of any Souls game. Usually is like because Elden Ring was an excellent gateway for anybody who wasn't into Souls like games because
That's what I've heard.
while
It's a lot
it has
more.
its
You
hard
have a lot
elements,
more
it has
options.
well, it while it has its difficult elements, it's more forgiving because it has a
Okay.
lot of different save spots. There's a ton to explore, and there's a lot of good rewards for exploring. Uh, I think it's an excellent gateway in one sense. There's a sense in which it's not great in that if you go away from Elden Ring to other Souls games, you're immediately going to have the open world element taken away because the other ones are just
Yeah.
not open that same way. I mean, Dark Souls 3 is kind of open, but not quite.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's more. I've heard that the main Dark Souls games, their maps aren't open world, but they're more like Metroidvania like maps, where they're
Kind of, yeah.
kind of open world ish.
Yeah. I mean, they're extremely well laid out worlds. I mean, the layout of the other From Software worlds, with kind of the exception of Demon Souls is a little bit more standard. Go to this level, go to this level, go to this level. Uh,
Okay.
but I mean, it opens up a little bit as you go, but it take a while to explain how that one works. But the way they design the levels for the Dark Souls games and Bloodborne is pretty exceptional, honestly, because you'll be in an area that you've uh and like you'll find this door and you'll open it up and it'll be a shortcut to an area that you were in like hours and hours ago, and it's like, oh, that's really cool how they interconnected that way. It's almost like you're working your way through this multi-tiered, Metroidvania like maze that strangely connects to other parts. It's cool how they do it.
Yeah, that's what I've
uh
heard about the maps from those ones.
yeah, but whereas Elden Ring, obviously it's just a giant open world. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's that's a great gateway to that franchise. Whereas like Lies of P, what I'm curious about is, from what I'm watching, if you've never played a Souls game before, I imagine it might not be a game you like that much. That would be my guess. Is that if you're not into those games, you might not like it. But at least that's kind of what I'm seeing from some people. But
I would say that's a fair assessment.
yeah, but I haven't watched enough of it to
I haven't
be
watched
firm
almost
on
anything
anything.
about it. I just know
Yeah,
that it's a Souls-like.
yeah. I've watched maybe like 2 hours of people playing it. Yeah,
More than me.
yeah.
Yeah,
It looks really nice.
I've started Dark Souls Remaster. I basically got through the Asylum Demon, and I've gotten a little bit past that. I plan to go back and actually play through it at some point. I
Mhm.
haven't started Sekiro, but I plan to do that at some point, and Elden Ring. I haven't started, and I plan to do that at some point.
Yeah.
So, uh, but the one often forgotten From Software game that I did play, and I really enjoyed it, was that, yeah, most people don't even remember it, was Ninja Blade. Are you even familiar with Ninja Blade?
I've heard of that. Yeah.
So that was a 360 game. Unfortunately, it's not backwards compatible, so I couldn't play it on my Xbox One or
I
my
didn't realize
Series
that
X
was
now.
From Software. Huh.
Yeah, I remember that because I remember the splash screen before you, or right before you got the splash screen, it comes up and says From Software, and I'm like, from who software?
Yeah, it's like,
It was
from
the
which
first time.
software?
Yeah, it was the first time I heard of this company. I'm like, this is like a who's on second, what's on first sort of situation. I'm like, what kind of stupid name is this? But being a big fan of Ninja Gaiden, I was really interested in Ninja Blade. And I really liked that game. And I completed it, and it only took like 2 or 3 playthroughs, so it wasn't like a huge time sink. I
Was it
enjoyed it, but
hard?
it was, if you had never played like a hack and slash like that before, I know people were saying it was difficult, but compared to Ninja Gaiden, which I had played a ton of, it was a piece of cake compared to Ninja Gaiden.
Okay.
But I really liked it. Another thing that put people off is that it is nuts with the QTEs in Ninja Blade, but
Ah.
like they're all over the game. But the cool thing about it that kind of made up for it is they're some of the most over the top ridiculous cutscenes of any game ever. So they're pretty awesome. Like I want to say it's the very first level. You play as this cool ninja. He looks a lot like Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden, but his name is Ken something. I don't remember what his last name is. But I think the start of the level, you're in a helicopter and you don't have a parachute on. You just jump out, and on the way down, there's all these like flying demons that come at you, and there's a QTE for each one of them. And then you land, and then after you beat the mini boss of the level, you surf on a missile into the mini boss or something, and then at the end of the level, you're on top of like this giant wrecking ball, and somehow you get it to swing around, and then you cut the chain at the last minute and it goes flying and crushes the boss. The QTEs in the game were just crazy, but it was there are a lot of them, but they were just over the top. They were really enjoyable. I would like to go back and play it. It's just, it takes a lot to get me to go back to play a game that I've already got all the achievements in, especially if it's not backwards compatible and I got to play it on my 360.
Right.
But it's not terribly long, so I could probably just run through the campaign again, just because I only played it basically through the however many times it took me to complete it like 10 years ago. But
I think
yeah, that's the only
if I
From
had to
Software game
guess,
I
if I
have
had to
played
guess why,
extensively.
if I had to guess why they probably most people don't talk about that game as far as From Software is concerned, is because it's not directed by Miyazaki, who's done
Okay,
all of their most popular games. It's directed by someone different. Now
that would make sense.
he was one of the artists on it.
But he wasn't in charge
Yeah,
of
he
the
wasn't in charge of that
project.
because let's see, I want to say Demon Souls came out not too long after that game for PlayStation. It's also, yeah, because they actually came out the same year. They came out in side by side in 2009. I
Okay,
think,
yeah. Ninja Blade was April of 2009. I played it in July of 2009 over
right.
like 3 weeks, and I
Yeah, and
haven't
Demon
played it
Souls came
since.
out, I think, about 6 months later. So
Okay.
it was that's I guess Ninja Blade was the Xbox exclusive, and then, uh, PlayStation lucked out and they
Oh,
got Demon Souls instead, which
was it?
had a much bigger impact.
Huh, I didn't know that Ninja Blade was not on PlayStation.
I
I
don't think it was.
I don't know. That would make sense though if it was basically Xbox got Ninja Blade and
Yeah, it was
PlayStation
just,
got.
Windows and 360. Yep.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. But yeah,
'Cause they've
I
never
enjoyed
From
that game.
Software's never been exactly PlayStation exclusive. It's just I think most people thought they were because Demon Souls was a pretty big hit for them. I mean, not it wasn't I mean, Dark Souls is where they really took off, but
Yeah,
Demon Souls is where they kinda got people's attention because they were like, "Oh, this is
that
kinda like
was
a
basically the
throwback to,
first.
like, the really hard games again."
Yeah, and Demon Souls was basically the game that created the Soulsborne genre, right?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, it's and I remember, and this was back when Game Informer was a decent publication. Um, I remember getting the issue where that game got reviewed. I had never heard of it, and I read the review because they gave it like a 9 out of 10, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a good score. It's like, what is this? And I was just reading about how hard it was to play, and I was like, I guess I just been so inundated for those several years with
With
games that
easy
are much
games.
easier that I was like, "Oh, that sounds intimidating. I don't know if I'd wanna ever do that," but I was intrigued, and then Dark Souls came along, and it was, oddly enough, Game Informer gave Dark Souls a lower score than Demon Souls,
Hmm.
by, I think they gave it like an 8.75, I think? Uh, and yet Dark Souls completely took off. I mean, like everybody I knew was talking, "Oh, you got to play Dark Souls," and I was like, "Is it a sequel to Demon Souls?" Because I know it's the same people. They're like,
People are like, "What's
"No,
Demon
not."
Souls?"
Well, no, they knew what Demon Souls was. They were just like, "No,
Okay.
it's not a sequel to that." They're like, "It's yes, it's got the Souls thing on it. Yes,
Plays
it's
a
the
lot like
same
it, but it's
people.
not
It
related to the story.
plays pretty much the exact same in a lot of ways." But I was like, That's just a different game." I was like, "Oh, okay." Uh, but I know the first time I booted up Dark Souls, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? Because it doesn't hold your hand at all. It's just like,
Yeah.
here you go.
Nope.
Have fun.
Good
Have
luck.
fun getting killed a lot. I was like, oh, this is actually really hard. But
Yeah.
then so I abandoned it, and then Bloodborne came along, and it looked so good. And I was like, I can't not play this. This looks too good. So where I worked, we were on strike for like 6 weeks, and I started playing Bloodborne. And I was like, this is incredible. This is so
Nice.
good, but it's so hard. It really wasn't until like the fourth boss, and when I took that one down, and then had heard that a lot of people had trouble with it, I beat it on the first try. I was like, okay, I'm
Maybe
gonna
I
beat
can do
this game.
this.
I was like, no, I mean, I was like, okay, I have resolved. I'm going to beat this. I don't care how long it takes.
Okay.
I'm beating this, and I fell in love with it completely. I absolutely
Awesome.
fell in love with it, and then I
Have
went
you
back and played the others.
speaking of Ninja Gaiden, have you played any of the Ninja Gaiden, the rebooted games?
I played the first one. I played a
Okay.
little bit of the second one, but didn't finish it. But I did finish the first Ninja Gaiden. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was actually a lot of
Yeah, it's
fun.
one of my favorite games of all time. Because it was originally released as just Ninja Gaiden, then they
Mhm.
re-released it a year or so later as Ninja Gaiden Black because they had released DLC for it. Basically, one of the first games with DLC on console on Xbox Live, which no one had at the time because no
Yeah.
one even had broadband internet yet. So they re-released it with a new disc with all of that content on it as Ninja Gaiden Black, and that's one of my favorite games ever. So I was just curious if you had played those ones. So
Yeah, I remember a lot of the bosses being brutally difficult. I mean, it was kind of a game that in a lot of ways reminded me of Devil May Cry. Uh,
okay, yeah,
but
that
at
makes
the
sense.
like I would say at the time I played Ninja Gaiden, I would have called Ninja Gaiden significantly harder. But then again, a lot of people had already played Devil May Cry 3. I had not, so I didn't know comparatively how those were. I had just played the first one. But its style kind of reminded me of that, but I was like, this is
That
I
makes sense.
liked Ninja Gaiden quite a bit more, at the time, because I was like, it looks better, you know,
It's
cut
it was
cut people's heads off and
probably
stuff, and it's
it was
cool. It was
probably
really
the
cool.
best looking game on the original Xbox. It looks better than plenty of
Yeah,
like
it actually
360
and it
games.
holds up fairly
Oh,
well.
it holds up perfect in
Still
my
a
opinion.
good-looking game. Like, you could release that game in just about any PlayStation Store or anything, and it's like I think most people would still pay 15-20 bucks for it, no problem. It's
Yeah.
a strong, it's a really fun game. It looks great, looks really good for its time.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, yeah, we're almost at hour 50, so I didn't mean to keep you this long, but
Oh
I
no,
appreciate it.
I always assume, I think I go into streams assuming at least 3 hours.
Oh, okay.
That's my normal assumption, is just prepare for at
I
least three.
usually do 90 minutes to 2 hours,
Okay.
and kind of judge, going longer based on how, on the guest. But yeah, I know I kept you up past your bedtime. So,
No, it's fine. I was up so long last night getting my Rings of Power video uploaded and finished up that I was prepared.
okay.
I knew this was coming. I was like, that's fine. I just want to I'll get that out, and I'll be ready for the next one, and then maybe I'll pull an all night or get ready for whatever my next video is gonna be.
Well, I'm glad we were able to move the schedule around to accommodate your schedule so I could get you on so we could talk games.
Yeah, this was
Um,
fun.
yeah, basically all I do here is just talk about video games. Might be by myself, might be, open mics are basically just like this. No plan, just talk about games and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah,
Party chats on every other Saturday is a little more structured, where we actually have like topics, fun video game related topics. Um,
nice.
but yeah, so if you haven't, Gord King here just released a couple hours ago a video on the Rings of Power, so go check that out. I'm planning on doing that maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but definitely very soon. What else you got planned coming up on your channel?
Well, tomorrow, hang on, let me check real quick to see if the poll has swayed to where I can make a definitive choice right now. So getting closer, I'm gonna have to.
Okay.
My poll is right now with 9 votes. BioShock is winning by a vote. So if that holds, I'll be starting the BioShock trilogy tomorrow, which I've played
And
1, I've played Infinite, I've never played 2, so that'll
okay.
be a first timer. But I'll do that one after the next before October, which I'll be playing some horror related games for, the Halloween season.
Okay.
Uh,
Very appropriate for you being the Gord King.
yeah. um,
Very Gordy season.
yeah, our people
Um,
go through so much. They carve into us and everything. Um,
Now was that poll on your community tab or was that on Twitter?
Community tab.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to vote for what game he's going to play next, go find his community tab and vote on what game you think he should play next.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so for me, I've got, because we're doing open mic tonight, which I typically do on Thursday. I think on Thursday night I'm going to be doing some game streaming for a little bit, and then I got my next episode of Party Chat on Saturday with returning guest, the Salty Nerd, Alex, the Salty Nerd, a good buddy of mine. He was on my very first Party Chat episode, but because he was also on his own channel's Saturday stream that day, he only got to came in for like the last 30 minutes, and I had to leave early because I was going to go see Mission Impossible. So he's coming back so we can have a little bit more in-depth discussion for Party Chat on Saturday, which I think is episode 6, I want to say. And I did preemptively add the link to Gord King's channel in the description notes, whatever, of this stream. So if you want to go check him out, his link is right there. So yeah, appreciate you coming on and talking video games with me. If you ever want
My
to
pleasure.
talk more video games, let me know and you can come back on. Or if you want to have me on yours, we can figure that out as well. So,
Absolutely.
well, I appreciate it. All of my usuals in the chat: Vanquish, Paul Hadouken. I guess that was it. I thought I saw a couple more people. Oh, it's because you were in there. Yeah, there's a bunch of the other people that I usually talk to who are also streaming at this time right
I
now.
think I
So
see Angry Canadian here sometimes too.
yeah, he's in here
I see
a
him
lot
in a
too.
few. I see him in other streams also. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, a lot of the other people that I usually stream with or are in my chat are streaming right now as well. So a lot of us are competing for the same viewers.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, anyone who has checked it out live or watched on the replay, appreciate it. And if anyone else out there wants to come on and talk video games with me, let me know. I'm happy to have pretty much anyone on just talk video games because that's what I do here. So, thank you for joining me for another episode of Open Mic. And we will catch you next time, everyone. And in the meantime, game on.